This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you for joining us on the training for the Community Advisory Committee. This is training on the Florida's Government and the Sunshine Law. With me today is, let me get your slide up here. With me today is Art Hardy. He's the Sarasota County School Board Attorney. And I'm Andrea Messina, the Executive Director of the Florida School Boards Association. Hello, Art. Thanks for being with us.
Hi, Andrea. Good to be with you. And committee members, thank you for your service. We appreciate all the work you're going to be doing, and it's obviously a very important role, and we appreciate all the help you're giving us.
On the website, if you go to the Sarasota County Public Schools website, you'll see a little portal that is specifically designated for all the materials related to the superintendent search. I tell you that because as a member of the Citizens Advisory Committee, there may be times when you want to go and look at that and reference some materials. This is actually a picture from the cover of the brochure. It's a digital brochure that we use to help market Sarasota to candidates. I do want to mention that the information we're presenting to you today can be found in the Government in the Sunshine Manual. Each year, you'll notice this one is listed as the 2020 edition, but each year it's updated. And of course, most of your, all of your elected officials ought to have it. I'm guessing, Art, you have one of these in your office as well.
I certainly do.
Yeah, it's interesting reading. I don't know if you've ever encouraged people to read it, but it's more than just the law. It also kind of provides some scenarios for people to understand. It's a little more detailed probably than people on this committee want, but if you have one or two of those people who are really interested, this is the book to go to. The Florida Public Meetings and Records Law, which we fondly call the Sunshine Law, is actually found in Florida Statute 286.011. And it really goes through the very specifics. But if we're going to be simple about it, Art, what are the main things that they need to be concerned about?
Well, under the Sunshine Law, and the Superintendent Search Committee is part of the Sunshine Law, is governed by the Sunshine Law. That means that any committee meetings have to be duly noticed. The public has to have the ability to participate, and minutes must be taken. Now, the good news for the committee members is the school board staff will take care of noticing the meetings and making sure the public has the ability to participate and to do the meetings. The really important thing for advisory committee members to know is that any conversations, communications between them about items related to the superintendent search have to be conducted at duly noticed public meetings. So that means communications are obviously in person, over the phone, via email, via text, carrier pigeon, any way people will communicate. That communication can only be done at a duly noticed public meeting. So if you happen to meet other members of the committee at the produce section in Publix, you can talk about anything you want, your family, the weather, anything you want, except issues related to the superintendent search. Those can only take place during a meeting.
All right, so I'm going to ask you to specifically say that again, because one of the things that I find working with school board members is they get confused. They think they can't say anything to somebody on the school board. But you specifically said anything that has to do with this topic is what they can't talk about, correct?
Right. So people can talk to each other about anything in the world that they'd like to talk about, except issues related to the superintendent search. Issues, the way it would come up for most governments is if it's something you may vote on in your position as a school board member or city commissioner or county commissioner. In the case of the superintendent search advisory committee, it's about any topic related to the superintendent search. So
Okay,
if you see each other, don't talk about, boy, did you see the resume of the person from such and such place? Or what did you think about candidate so-and-so? You can talk about other things.
Talk about the Tiger King on Netflix.
You could talk about that if you really feel the need to.
Okay, just want to make sure. And with regard to public records, now this is one that people, again, you said anything, even if it's by carrier pigeon. So I appreciated you saying that. Any record, any document, it could be a recording, it could be anything that has to do with their service on this committee must be maintained and archived. Is that correct?
That's correct. Anything related to the superintendent search, any document or recording will be a public record. So I assume that the committee members are mostly going to be getting documents from school staff, resumes, cover letters, those kinds of things. Obviously, those are all public records, and they will be maintained by the school staff. But if, for example, an individual board member or committee member receives an email from a friend because they know they're on this committee, and that friend sends an email and says, I think you should really closely look at candidate X. That email is a public record because it's about the superintendent search committee work. The committee members will all receive email addresses from the school system. So they will have like for me, arthardy@sarasotacountyschools.net. They will get those, and all of the public business to and from school board staff should be used. Those email addresses should be used. If for some reason, and this probably won't happen, but if it does, if someone sends a committee member an email on their personal email account, their Gmail or whatever, Yahoo account, then my suggestion to the committee member is to automatically forward that to your SarasotaCountySchools.net email account, so that if there is ever a records request, you can say, if I ever got an email, it would be contained on my public SarasotaCountySchools.email account. And I give that advice to board members as well. And the purpose of that is so that if there's ever a request, we can go to the SarasotaCountySchools.net email and get all of the records. And that's really designed to maintain the privacy of your personal email account so that no one's ever looking through that. Chances are that won't happen, but you really should follow that advice, I think, and forward anything you get to your public SarasotaCountySchools.net email address.
Perfect. And we're going to get into that a little bit more detailed in just a minute. I do want to mention, when people think about the Sunshine Law, typically they think about the elected officials. And I just want to be clear that this is considered an appointed board. It's a board appointed by the school board who falls under the Sunshine Law. And really, it's by virtue of that they are then also, as an appointed board, this committee is performing some tasks that they are reporting to the school board. That's what causes them to be under the Sunshine Law. And as you mentioned before, it applies, the Sunshine Law, not talking to each other, applies to any topic which will foreseeably come before the board for action. So the topic of superintendent and who's the next superintendent is really a very narrow scope. And we do that on purpose so that the committee members could still talk about, for example, I don't know, the principal of a school, or whether or not we're going to be starting school in July or August, or some other topic that's not specific to the superintendent search, correct?
Correct. It's not all school-related topics. It's topics related to the superintendent search.
Got it. That's what I wanted to make sure. And then just to remind the members that the meetings are going to be open. Because the meetings are open, that means that anyone who wants to attend can attend. Now, you did mention that very likely this particular committee is going to have to meet virtually. What that means is that we will have to advertise and make available the link for people to join in. They won't have talking privileges during the meeting, but they can certainly submit their public comments just in the same way that your school board is currently managing public comments. They can submit them prior to the meeting, but we cannot exclude anyone. We can't exclude employees because they're considered citizens as well. Everyone has access because it is going to be a public meeting. And we also, let's just say that we're able to physically meet, we have to just make sure that where we're meeting is accessible to the public as well.
Correct. The public will be able to, in essence, watch whether people are physically together in a large room or whether it's a virtual meeting.
And as you mentioned with the minutes, we are not going to need a committee member to take the minutes. Staff is going to be taking those minutes, but they will be maintained in a central location, and they too are public record. So I just want to support this committee by letting them know that staff is here to help. You as legal counsel are here to help, and the Florida School Boards Association is actually going to be facilitating those meetings. So we'll be with the committee members while they're meeting, just to make sure that everything is complied with. And there are times when sometimes there might be a sidebar conversation or something where we would say, hey, you know, you need to refrain from the sidebar because everything needs to be in the public or something like that. We'll help to ensure that everyone remains in compliance. I do want to mention, just in case somebody from staff, let's say a teacher or an administrator, happens to be on this committee, typically staff meetings are not considered under the Sunshine Law requirement. But if a staff member is not serving as a staff member and becomes an appointed member of a committee, that's when they would find themselves under the scope of the Sunshine Law. So working on this committee has a little bit of a public profile that people just need to be aware of. And because of that, that's why they have this additional level of scrutiny. When we talk about the scope of the Sunshine Law, one of the things that people sometimes fail to recognize is that it is the nature of the act performed that requires something to be under the Sunshine Law. The Sunshine Law is one of those laws, and there aren't a lot of them, that actually it's the intent of the law, which is really what is most important, which means you're doing the business of the public, everything should be public. Let's shift quickly to public records, because anything that somebody gets makes a public record, and you briefly mentioned that once before. So if somebody, you talked about if somebody were to receive something on their personal email, but what if somebody were to have somebody post something on their Facebook page?
I think if something personal is on a personal Facebook page, it becomes more difficult to deal with. Best not to delete things, at least in the short term, but I would direct people to ask if they have comments, friends or neighbors or relatives who want to comment, that really it should be something that's emailed to the personal, or not to the personal, but rather to the school board email address.
So
but personal Facebook accounts typically are personal in nature. The school board obviously has Facebook accounts and other social media, and all of those are maintained. Things could be forwarded certainly to the school board account.
So if I have a personal Facebook account and I'm on this committee and somebody says, hey, what do you think about candidate number 12? Are you suggesting that I, as the committee member, respond to that person and say, hey, can you please email your question to me at this email address, which is the one that you gave them for Sarasota schools, and then you respond over there?
I think that would be a safer way to go. That's not, first let's talk about, that's not a sunshine issue at all, because this other person is not a committee member, and committee members can talk to third parties, including staff, school staff members. They can talk to anybody who's not a committee member about the process. So it's not a sunshine issue, rather it's a public records issue. And if you're having a conversation through email or however, that creates a document as opposed to a phone call, then those would be public records. And it's certainly easier to maintain and retrieve if necessary, if it's all done with the SarasotaCountySchools.net account. There is no prohibition to picking up the phone and calling someone, because that is not creating a public record. Of course, you can't call other committee members, but anyone that you legally can talk to, if you're talking to them as opposed to writing them, then you don't have to worry about the public records issue. So frequently a phone call is a smarter way to go.
And if, let's say, a committee member doesn't forward these types of things to their Sarasota County email address that you all provide, and let's say maybe the press is requesting all communications from all committee members on this topic. If they haven't forwarded these messages and these types of communications to their school district email, how do those records get produced?
Well, the person would have to be asked to do a search of their own email for them and produce documents. So it would be important to maintain those documents at least for a period of time. Certainly, if there are questions about that, I could be involved. You could be involved. We would help the person with that. There can be times, however, that people's private email systems, the court has ordered to be reviewed by a third party to make sure if there's some evidence that a document wasn't properly disclosed. So my advice to try to make sure that doesn't happen, I think there's a hugely small chance of that happening, but to try to guard against that, if you always forward your emails, then that'll never be a problem.
Right.
So
put the onus on the district by doing that instead of yourself.
Right. We want to help people maintain the privacy of their own account, because they're helping us by being on this committee should not subject their private email accounts to any kind of scrutiny. So just keep any emails that there are on the SarasotaCountySchools.net email address.
So as a committee member, if I'm out there Googling the candidates and I come across an article that I think either is particularly positive towards a candidate or perhaps even critical of a candidate, and I believe the other Citizen Advisory Committee members need to see this article. How should I then distribute that? Is it okay for me to share a news story with the other members of the committee without getting into conversation about it?
Well, the technical answer to that is yes. The Sunshine Law is violated only when there's a two-way conversation. So one person can theoretically put something out to other members. My suggestion on that would be one of two things. One, bring it up at a publicly noticed meeting. That's the easiest way. Once you're in a publicly noticed meeting, you can talk about anything you want. That is the place to talk about this process with your fellow committee members. And if you wanted to bring copies, you certainly could do that. The other thing you could do is send that article or the link to the article to your staff, to the staff contact or to FSBA, and ask for that to be routed to the entire committee. So if I'm a committee member and I find something I think is important, if I sent it to you, Andrea, which I'm certainly entitled to talk with you back and forth as much as I'd like, and ask you, please send this out to the rest of the committee, then you could use the SarasotaCountySchools.net email account and forward that article to the rest of the committee. And then you don't have any committee members communicating in any way with each other. You're not asking for comment back that you're sharing. You're simply giving out further information. And that would all be a public record, obviously.
Yes, and that's exactly what we would recommend, is that rather than even questioning yourself, you send it to one of the, and we're going to have the emails of the Sarasota County staff, Kathy Tompkins and Linda Termine, at the end of this training, but they can send it to you, me, Linda, Kathy, and we would then send an email to everyone and just say, here's an article for your review that has been shared. We'd like to share this article with you, something along those lines. The one thing that people like you, me, Kathy, Linda, any staff member with whom committee members may converse, the one thing we cannot do is try to gather information from the committee members that would in any way indicate what their view is on a candidate. So they kind of call that daisy chaining, or actually it's a sunshine violation for me to ask one committee member, hey, do you like candidate 3? What are your thoughts on candidate 3? And then go to another committee member and say, you know, such and such a committee member really supports candidate 3. What do you think about candidate 3? So serving as a liaison to try to share information like that is a no-no, correct?
Correct. Staff cannot do indirectly what two committee members could not do directly. We can't be a conduit of information between committee members, nor can anyone else.
Right. And I will say it's interesting because people think that the only people that can be found guilty of sunshine law violations are either the elected officials or the appointed officials. But I don't know if you paid attention a few years ago. I think it was in Orange County, Orlando, and it was their expressway authority. But there was the wife of one of the expressway authority people. I think it was his wife or spouse or somebody, some related person, that was found guilty of serving as a conduit in the way that you're discussing, and that's not legal. That is a violation. And so just kind of keep your conversations tight and in the public meeting. That's all we're asking. The other thing I do want to mention is that the committee itself could adopt reasonable rules and policies, just like the board can say 3 minutes for public comment. This committee could say 3 minutes for public comment. They can create some rules to make sure that they have orderly meetings, but you cannot disrupt, you cannot ban anybody from recording. So if we were in a live school board chambers meeting, for example, and a citizen came in with a camera and wanted to record the meeting, we would have to allow that as long as the recording was not disruptive to the meeting. And I just say that we may or may not have face-to-face meetings for this particular group given the current health community situation. But if it comes up and somebody does film, sometimes that makes some committee members uncomfortable. And I just like to tell them in advance that if somebody wants to film, they're allowed to film. That's what citizens are allowed to do. There are some penalties related to sunshine law and public records violations. I have never, ever seen a penalty on citizens advisory committees, but we do just like to mention it so that people know it is a law, and it is a law that can be enforced. So we do take it seriously. I know you as an attorney certainly take it seriously, and I just want to kind of provide the context that it's not something to play around with. And then I did want to mention, as I referenced earlier, there are 2 staff members in Sarasota County Schools who, if you have questions or you have articles or anything you want to share, these are the 2 ladies, and this will be provided to you in other methods as well. But Kathy Tompkins and Linda Termine, they are the support staff to the school board and the superintendent. Both of them are working closely with us on this superintendent search and on the community advisory committee. So if you email either one of these ladies for anything, they're amazing and they'll get right back to you. Those are the email addresses you need to be aware of. And then finally, if anyone on this committee would like to have additional information about the sunshine law, they can call you, they can call me, but they can also look at the websites listed here. You could go to myflsunshine.com, you could go to the Office of the Attorney General, Ashley Moody, you could go to the First Amendment Foundation, and you could actually pull up a digital copy of the book that I referenced right at the beginning, which is the 2020 Government in the Sunshine Manual for Florida. Art, do you have any final thoughts?
Just, we've given you all a lot of information. I think the big takeaways are maintain whatever documents you get them to the school board. And 2, don't communicate in any way, email, text, phone, meeting with other committee members about the superintendent search outside of the noticed meetings. So really, if you do those 2 things, they're not going to be a problem. And if you have questions, ask us. And again, I'll just say we appreciate your service and thank you for helping us out finding the next superintendent for Sarasota County.
Yes, and I'll just mention, this is the single most important decision that the school board will make, who's going to lead the district. And the school board has intentionally identified this committee as a group of citizens whose opinions they value. And they very much, on behalf of the board, I want to thank you for your service to this committee. I know the board is looking forward to the outcomes and the recommendations that this committee is going to make. So thank you for your time. We actually got it in under 30 minutes, Art, so I'm happy about that. And again, if you have any questions, let any of us know or either of these ladies know. So thanks very much, and we look forward to working with you.